Hey guys, what's up? It's River, and today we're talking about 7 reasons the Canon M50 may or may not be the perfect camera for you, with a bonus reason at the very end that will probably surprise you and will definitely make you laugh. Without further ado, let's get into it. So before I talk about any of the features in this camera, I have to talk about the size. One of the things that makes this camera so appealing is the fact that it is so small. The small footprint makes it really good for traveling, on-the-go people, and because it's a mirrorless style body, it also gives you built-in stabilization. And I genuinely believe if it wasn't such a small camera, it'd be a less attractive and probably not as affordable of a camera. So reason number 1, small footprints and all the benefits that come with it. Now that we've gotten size out of the way, the other thing that I love about this camera is the fact that it has the same sensor as the Canon 80D, which is $1,600, while this camera is only $650, plus it has a newer image processor. This has the Canon Digic 8 processor. So if you compare the image from this to Canon 80D, you get better ISO performance and you get faster shutter speeds. The Canon 80D only does 7 or 8 frames per second in terms of photo, but this camera does 10. It's not a huge margin, but just the fact that you pay less money and you get more matters to me. So yeah, despite this being a smaller, more affordable camera, this actually has better specs on paper than the more expensive cameras. Another benefit of getting a newer Canon mirrorless camera is the fact that this camera will take the older EF and L series lenses with the mount, plus you can use the newer Canon lenses. If you're not too familiar with what's going on with Canon lenses right now, they're making newer lenses that are just overall like better designed, more robust, and better quality because Canon's had time to develop their lens technology. But the newer mirrorless lenses are actually faster, sharper, are like better built, and just personally, I think if I had the option, I would only ever buy mirrorless Canon glass from now on. But because you have the option of using the mirrorless glass, but it is more expensive, but because you've got that new mount, you can actually put on the older Canon lenses, which is super affordable. What probably would have cost $3,000, like maybe let's say 2015, 2016, in 2019, you can buy for maybe $1,000 to $1,200 because those older lenses are not as valuable now because a lot of photographers are switching over. So if you're on a budget or you think the older lenses are completely fine, because really they are. I've shot tons of projects on the Canon 24-70 L series lens. That thing is such a beast. You could totally get one of those lenses, put this on, get it at a really good rate. And yeah, this camera just gives you so many options with lenses. Also, quick side note, if you are gonna buy lenses for this camera, I really recommend you look into the Sigma Art line. Those lenses are absolutely fantastic. They're super sharp, super well built, and they're very affordable. Definitely look into the Sigma Art line. The next reason I really like this camera is it has a flip up screen and it's articulating. This thing is such a godsend, and while it's this familiar Canon design, I actually feel like the screen on this looks better, sharper, and like the colors are more saturated. And I actually find when I'm looking at my image on this screen, it's pretty like 98.9999% accurate to what the image will look like on my computer. Generally, Canon LCDs are not the most color accurate, though if I'm being honest, I don't really know many manufacturers that have a back screen that's very accurate for exposure and color. But this LCD is really good. I think it's like OLED or something. I'm not really sure. Don't know too much about the LCD screen, but it looks really good to my eyes. And I really found that like looking at the image on this LCD screen to what was on my computer was very accurate. And plus, this LCD screen just has so many benefits. One, it's touchscreen. This camera gets way easier to operate with the touchscreen. Plus, if you're a vlogger and yeah, you know, point the LCD screen at yourself, see yourself, and just vlog. And because it's such a tiny camera, with that LCD screen, you can always make sure you're in focus, but this camera has amazing focus tracking. You can always make sure in focus. That LCD screen is really helpful to use. So yeah, generally small cameras like this don't have an LCD screen that's flippable and of such high quality. So yeah, one of the reasons that I think this camera really stands out is this high quality LCD screen that's flippable, it's good for monitoring, and it's a godsend for vloggers. So Canon cameras always have fantastic autofocus, but this camera lets you touch things and focus right to them. The autofocus in this camera is super fast, super reliable, but one thing that I really like about this camera is that once you touch something and the camera recognizes, okay, that's your object, whether it's a bouquet of flowers, a person's face, a dog, a car, as you move your camera around, it will track that object through your frame. And even if you go out of your frame and come back, generally I find that it knows what you were looking at and it will track right back to it. That is a godsend. That is like making, I don't even know what to call it, because in the regular film industry, you have a dedicated person that gets paid a ton, like generally like $500 to $600 a day just to manage focus and make sure the image is in focus. So if you can get that for free in a camera like this, it makes it so much easier for professionals. If you're a content creator, like done, game over. This autofocus is amazing. But if you're someone that's a professional, you're saving like $500, $600 a day by not hiring a focus puller or a first AC, because this camera does such a good job tracking your autofocus. And also on top of that, put this camera on a gimbal with this autofocus, it's game over. It is game over. I think Sony does autofocus the best, but if you're someone that loves Canon colors, this autofocus is amazing, and this small size, perfect for gimbals. So one of the things that's great about having a mirrorless body is that Canon was able to incorporate an in-body stabilization system for this camera. Basically what that means is you no longer get shaky footage. I mean, again, you can't just roll your camera around all willy-nilly, but generally for walking stuff, you won't get that like bumpiness or that jitter or shakiness, because there's a system to keep the sensor itself stable. And that does a few things. One, you can use different lenses on this, and because stabilization is in body, you don't have to rely on the lenses. Normally Canon lenses have the stabilization built into the lens, because now it's in the body. It makes it super, super, super easy to pick any lens you want and just know that you're gonna get stable footage. So yeah, one of the big benefits of having this camera be a mirrorless body is the stabilization, but that's not all. The other thing that I don't think Canon really intended for this, but makes it a godsend, is the fact that this camera can do hyperlapses. Most Canon cameras have a time-lapse mode built right in, but because of the in-body stabilization, you can now do hyperlapses. To kind of give you an example of what a hyperlapse is, we'll play a clip over my face right now, but basically it's when you're doing time-lapse but moving at the same time. And normally when you're moving, your camera tends to shake, and time-lapses don't look very good when you're moving. But because of that in-body stabilization, you can smooth it out in post, but you get a pretty smooth video in camera anyways, and that just makes your life that much easier as a content creator. So yeah, the fact that this camera accidentally, because I don't think Canon intended this, does hyperlapses in camera is 10 out of 10 in my books. And one of the things that makes this package really complete, and I genuinely don't think it would be quite as good of a camera without this feature, is right here. It's this tiny little thing right on the side. Right there, not sure if you can see it, but that's an external mic jack. Yeah, because this is such a good vlogging camera, this camera honestly would be ruined without having an external mic jack. Now, one thing to note is that generally this flip screen will hit that mic, like right now it's kind of hitting that jack. So yeah, you got to be a little bit careful, but the fact that this has a mic jack in much small body, if you know anything about cameras that are on the market right now, like everybody complains about not having a mic jack on their small cameras. Everybody wants a small camera, but most of these small cameras don't have a mic jack simply because they don't have the space. Or I've seen a lot of manufacturers do like the silliest thing ever where they put an HDMI port on the side with like a headphone jack and like a USB port, and it's like, who needs a USB port on a camera now anyways? But they won't have an external mic jack. This has the external mic jack, and it has the HDMI and the USB port. You just get everything with this camera. So yeah, that external mic jack makes it really good, because if you're doing professional work and you need to like laugh people up or have professional audio going into this camera for an interview, it's got you covered. If you're a vlogger and you need to use an external mic, got you covered. If you want to do gimbal work and you can't really put a mic on this, or you want to have a subject that's not close enough to pick up the internal audio, external mic, it's available to you. The fact that this has an external mic jack just makes this camera that much more capable and limits you to pretty much nothing. Like anything you can do with a professional DSLR, you can do with this camera. I really appreciate the external mic jack on this. And something to note, this camera actually has very solid internal audio. I actually do not like putting external mics on my camera if I don't have to. And this camera, when I'm vlogging with it, and yes, I do vlog, when I'm vlogging with this camera, the internal audio is very solid, and I've never found a reason to have to put a mic on top of it. So yeah, internal audio is super solid, just for those who care. And now for the bonus reason of why this camera is awesome. You get a tiny little camera, it's Canon, it's got amazing image quality, and I'm not saying that you're gonna feel like you're better than other people with this camera, but yeah, you'll feel better than other people with this camera. I'm not even making this up. Like, I've had like big Sony cameras that I've taken around. I've had like all these like fancy gear that I've taken around, but I took this camera out with me the other day just to like the mall and get coffee around the city. And I had like people asking me about this camera. When people see you with a camera like this, like they just know you're better than them. They just know you're cool. They just know you make mad money. They just know you get mad cash. I'm actually making all this up. In all seriousness, one of the things that I love about the Canon cameras is the community that they built. Yeah, like obviously I'm kidding about like you will feel better than other people, but generally I find whenever I'm roaming around with a Canon camera, people are always like, oh, you shoot Canon too, I shoot Canon too. And there's a very strong sense of community around Canon cameras that I don't really find with like Sony camera or Lumix cameras, because there's so many good Canon cameras on the market. And when you see someone with a Canon camera, like, you know, they went out, spent a ton of money, or, you know, in this case, pretty affordable camera, and got a Canon camera. Like, that's not something you just accidentally, like, you're like, oh, I don't know, I just picked up a Canon camera. Whoops, my bad. It's kind of like when you see someone like a really fancy pair of like Yeezys or like a really fancy pair of like shoes. You're like, right, you went out to the Adidas store, probably stood in line, dropped $3 on the Kanye West shoes. Of course, like, we have a bond. And I generally find that Canon does a very good job through like creative incubators, creative classes, creative tutorials, like artist panels. They really care about creating a strong sense of community for their shooters, and they really have a lot of material online that teaches people that use Canon cameras how to use them best. And they'll even have like professional photographers come in, do a talk, show you how they did something, and with like the shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and like they'll give you like a full tutorial. I really appreciate that. I don't really see Sony doing that, but yeah, that's the one thing I really appreciate about Canon cameras. I feel like I can take this around, people get it, they're like, oh, you shoot Canon, we have a bond. And yeah, I think if you're just starting out, one of the best reasons to get Canon cameras is the fact that you'll make more friends. Like, I know that sounds far-fetched, but you will immediately see a community. You will be able to kind of identify with other shooters. And yeah, that's one of the things that I knew would surprise you. But yeah, Canon cameras, strong sense of community. A quick side note, if you do want to feel better than other people, the quickest and easiest way to do that is just to get a really big lens. Like, this is a very good 15 to 45 millimeter lens. But if you want to feel just like completely better, like you walk on water, I recommend getting the Canon 24 to 70 f2.8 L series lens. That lens is fantastic. It is too expensive for most people to afford. And yeah, you get that lens, you walk around, and people will just like know you're better than them. Most likely they'll start paying for your coffee, ask for selfies, and yeah, that's how you become a baller. And the last bonus reason, this camera will help you feel like you're better, cooler, and just like overall like a better person than most people, because for the price of an 80D, you could get 2 of these cameras and probably have some cash left over for a burrito. Or for like the price of a Canon C100 or like even an A7S II, you could get 3 of these cameras. I'm kind of kidding, but in all seriousness, one of the things that I love about the low price point of this camera, if you're someone that's just starting a photography or like video business, or you're someone that just like for whatever reason needs more cameras because maybe you're shooting like a small documentary or like making your own independent feature, this camera is super affordable. It has a great image, great features, and it's a really good camera. But a lot of times on bigger jobs or like bigger projects, you need more than one camera. And because it's such an affordable camera, you could buy a bunch of these, maybe even break 1 or 2 of these, and you would be fine because you have spare bodies. So yeah, I really recommend thinking about buying multiple of the Canon M50 instead of just like putting all your money into one camera, because this camera, despite its low price, does 80 to 90% of what most of the more expensive cameras do in terms of image quality. Like, yeah, some of those cameras might have like XLR input for audio, or they might have like, I don't know, like super slow motion or something. But this camera gets you 80% of the way there, and I would rather have 2 of these and be able to shoot multiple angles than just have one and then be like rushing to shoot multiple angles. So yeah, bonus reason. And yeah, if you have like a bunch of these, how can you not feel cool? Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us on a Canon M50 video. If you are interested in this camera, be sure to check out the link in the description down below for the absolute best pricing on this camera, because I do think this is a very good camera. And if you have any questions about this camera or anything that we talk about on this channel, hit me up in the comments down below and I'll be sure to get back to every single one of you. As always, be sure to like and subscribe for future content. Until next time, guys.